ReZero EX2 and 3, prequel side stories written by the same author as ReZero, follow Wilhelm as a teenager and young adult, focusing on how he met his wife, Theresia van Astrea, in a series of tales which become common folklore to the people of Lagunica known as the love ballad of the Sword Saint and the Sword Devil. EX2 focuses on the two meeting initially, as well as the Demihuman war which plagued Lagunica. Like before, I'm making these videos for the people who haven't read the EX books and would like the information from them to fill in some of the blanks about the world and main story. Half of this book has links to Arc 4, which is Season 2 content, so if you want to learn a bit more about Witch Mummy Echidna, strap in. The other half connects to Arc 5, which will be Season 3 of the show. I won't be saying which details connect to Season 3 or spoil anything that happens for Season 3, so the anime only fans can watch this video safely. And to be fair, this book did release before the light novels for Arc 4, so it's definitely worth knowing what happens in it before watching Season 3, as something may happen and you'll be like this. Since this book is one big story instead of multiple short stories like the first EX book, I don't have to divide the video into segments, covering each chapter. With that being said, 48 years before Subaru arrived at Lagunica, when Wilhelm was 12, a Demihuman merchant caravan was killed by Lagunican border guards, the reason of which was never discovered, but the Demihuman community believed it to be prejudice. This led to a Demihuman uprising that would last 9 years in a civil war that would be known as the Demihuman War. Apt. We start this book from the perspective of a boy named Grimm. You think your name is bad? You should not call Grimm. Grimm is having a pretty grim time. We meet Grimm in his first battle of the Demihuman War. His entire squadron has just been blown up and he was blown away by it, literally and figuratively. He realises war isn't all painting like moments of heroes swinging their swords, but blood-soaked battlefields. He walks alone through the smoke, lamenting on why he got to survive, and then comes face to face with a towering Demihuman, viewing him as prey. Why had he been allowed these few extra moments? Grimm's extra moment elongates as a small figure blocks the Demihuman hatchet. The small man's sword flew in an arc, the silver gleamed brighter against the fires. The sharp exhalation of breath and the dancing of the blade had their own unexpected kind of beauty. The flash of silver sent the enemy's head flying clean off, and the huge body collapsed at the ground in a spray of blood. Grimm goes to thank the figure, before realising he is younger than Grimm is. About 15 compared to Grimm's 18 years of life. He goes silent, looking into his eyes, seeing they were empty, holding no emotion. The boy leaves and Grimm follows, seeing a pile of corpses which the boy had made throughout the battle. The sky turns shades of red and blue, signalling victory to the royal army. Grimm looks to the sky in disbelief. All he had done was cling to his sword, cling to his life. The boy looks disappointed, commenting, "It was so trivial." The two don't reunite until they are both assigned to the same squadron, and Grimm learns the boy's name. The squadron go drinking. Wilhelm trains. The squadron dreams of becoming heroes of war. Wilhelm trains. The squadron gets along with one another. Wilhelm trains. Folter, a promising archer, discusses his dream with Grimm. Wishing to become a hero, he joined the war effort. Much similar to Grimm, who left his small village 3 years ago to live in the big city capital, and when the odd jobs he got could no longer satisfy his want for a new life, he went to join the army. However, the difference between the two is that Grimm no longer wishes to be a hero. He realises how fleeting life is, how tough war is on the front lines. But he must fill his stomach, so he stays. They talk some more before Grimm decides to leave, no longer able to get drunk on his dream, or enjoy the taste of alcohol like Folter can, or like the fabled first sword saint, Raid van Astrea, who was rumoured to like his wine and women, like any good hero, which every man would aspire to be. On his way back to the barracks, he encounters Wilhelm, training. Wilhelm is surprisingly cordial to Grimm. However, most of Wilhelm's replies end in him telling Grimm to be quiet, so Wilhelm can focus back on training. Grimm asks why he trains with the sword so much. Wilhelm replies that they are at war, and it is the one activity which is most likely to keep someone alive. However, he states this is not the reason he himself trains with the sword. Grimm questions what Wilhelm will do if he finds himself alone on the battlefield. Wilhelm firmly tells him, "Use my sword. 1 swing, 1 dead enemy. 2 swings, 2 dead enemies," reminding Grimm how he was alone when they ran into each other, and Wilhelm received commendations for killing 2 enemy commanders. Wilhelm tries to goad Grimm to fight him, but Grimm is unable to and leaves, wishing he had the strength this boy does. Over the next battle, Grimm's squad isn't immediately blown up. They're actually doing quite well in tight formation and making good progress across the battlefield, killing Demihuman left and right. The biggest part of their progress was, of course, Wilhelm, running everywhere like any good anime protagonist, just chopping away. Wilhelm, however, is not having such a great time. He feels something is wrong, and as he tries to communicate this with the squad leader, something goes wrong. The ground shakes, making most fall to the floor, wind full of dust covering the plain. In their panic, the squad begins a retreat. Wilhelm, realizing this is what the bad feeling is, yells to keep going forward. He deduces the cause of this miniature earthquake, and the glow of it too. Wilhelm finds him and realizes if the circle doesn't go off, the demihuman controlling it will most likely realize. As Wilhelm realizes this, he is just able to deflect a bullet with a demihuman emerging from the dust. But while no longer having the element of surprise, the demihuman is of no match to Wilhelm. Now, the book does say bullet and mentions a red tracer as well as tracer rounds. These don't come from actual guns but are generated through the user's own mana. Grimm, fruitlessly getting Wilhelm to turn back, is faced with a choice: trust Wilhelm's intuition that there are no enemies ahead, or turn back to the safety of numbers but the possibility of a trap. Grimm chooses the option least fearful to him. He goes forward. Grimm crests a hill and is greeted with the sight of Wilhelm slaughtering demihumans, his voice rising closer to a howl with each kill and seemingly smiling. Grimm, in shock, whispers to himself, "Devil." Turning away from the sight, Grimm sees dozens of faint circular lights in the battlefield behind him, which he watches wipe out the royal army. The two were found after the battle by reinforcements, Grimm on his knees, sobbing and apologising to his fallen comrades, which he had left behind. Wilhelm was still killing and laughing. This battle really cemented the idea to both sides of the war of the existence and the name Sword Devil. The squadron drank. Wilhelm didn't. Grimm stopped. The squadron dreamt of being heroes. Wilhelm didn't. Grimm stopped. The squadron died. Wilhelm and Grimm didn't. Now, I don't wish to trivialise the deaths of these fictional people, and while magic is more often found in demihumans than it is humans, it feels like the concept of "we can stop the magic circles from working if we rub part of the circle out" would be quite common knowledge in a war against more magically gifted beings. All in all, I really like this chapter. There's a great little arc for our lead Grimm. He starts out wishing to be a hero, but realises he is just a normal, weak person. He meets an extraordinary person, Wilhelm, and in beginning to be a bit like him, is able to survive what the others could not. When we see Wilhelm, we see he is different from how he is in the anime, much more rigid and a lot less caring, and we wonder how he made change from this little brat to the Wilhelm we know and love. This book is told chronologically through the perspective of Wilhelm. We're not going to do that here though. We're going to pick a random character and go through their perspective throughout the book and so on, until we go through all the important events. Why? Because there are a lot of moving parts in this book and a lot of characters who are important to the main ReZero story, and I want to highlight their arcs. Let's keep going with Grimm first. After being one of only 2 survivors in his squadron, the renowned Zergev squadron takes interest in having the duo join them, mainly due to hearing how competent Wilhelm is, so they assume the same for Grimm. This isn't the case, but they don't kick him out, which is nice. On one of their first excursions, they are sent back to Caster Field, a mission Grimm feels quite grim with. I promise I'll stop. Zergev's squadron's mission is to protect the kingdom's greatest knowledge of magic as they diagnose the magic circles used in battle. The expert's name is Roswell J. Mathers. Yo, Roswell is hot now. Roswell takes an interest in Wilhelm's gruff attitude and decides to have him and Grimm join her with 2 other soldiers. While the rest of the squadron make a wide perimeter, Roswell is also accompanied by a bodyguard, a lady named Carol Remendez. As they walk, Grimm and Carol fall deep in conversation, in which Wilhelm is grateful for the first time to Grimm, as Carol and himself quickly become at odds. Although that doesn't stop Roswell from flirting with, at Wilhelm. Carol tells Grimm that she is actually not meant to be the one to bodyguard Roswell, but the one she serves was meant to accompany her. So that makes Carol a bodyguard's bodyguard, apparently. As they finally arrive at the most dense area where the magic circles were used, Grimm gets a nervous feeling and an itch on his neck. He brings this up to Wilhelm before an arrow flies straight at them. Grimm managed to identify danger faster than Wilhelm did. They look to the source of the shot and see a familiar figure, Folter, but the half-rotten corpse of Folter. Roswell quickly identifies this as a curse as more bodies claw their way out from the ground. The curse itself having no discrimination on reanimating humans and demihumans. Grimm still hasn't been able to use a sword, but has started to be proficient with the shield. He and Carol tag team. He pushes against the undead as they surround Carol and himself, and even guides some of them to a blade. The rules with curses in ReZero is that there is a caster of sorts somewhere. In Season 1 there were the Mar beasts whose bites would place a curse on the bitee and would weaken them when the curse activated. Wilhelm goes deeper into the horde to find the caster and sees 2 zombies unmoving, covering something. He cuts them down but is quickly forced to dodge as fire takes up the space the zombies were in. What arises from the corpse is a small girl in a white robe, around 10 years old, a little younger or a little older perhaps. She had long, light pink hair and a charming face. Other than her bare feet and the robe that was her only clothing, she looked like a perfectly ordinary, if remarkably calm, young girl. Oh my god, it's one of the clones! The aura of this child dripped with heinous intent. Wilhelm's first words were asking what type of monster she is, to which she replies, "Monster. So I am indeed incomplete. I have a long way to go before I'm like my mother." This sets Roswell into a blind rage. "Mother! Surely you jest, to think that hideous damaged goods like you share anything at all with my honoured teacher. I won't hear of it." The facade of her easygoing nature immediately gone, she approaches the girl with an intent to kill. The girl, emotionless in the face of this, flies away, stating she already has what she came for, leaving the humans on the ground. The issue with killing the zombies is that energy cannot be destroyed, so the energy animating one zombie goes into the others to make them move faster, fight better. Luckily, like every faceless army, if you kill one specific thing, you can kill them all. Wilhelm glances at the 2 soldiers who join them on their journey and sees one of them has taken an arrow to the knee. That's when Wilhelm realises there is still one soldier who is just as skilled in death as he was in life. Folter. The girl, Sphinx as she's called, leaving at an apparently slow pace, calls down, "I believe we have chosen someone you will find difficult to kill. We've been watching you. Okay, bye." So it's not just plot convenience that the one undead soldier that they need to kill will make it emotionally hard to do so, as Sphinx has actually been watching the squadron. This means for the rest of the book, they will keep encountering traps like this especially designed to mentally break them in good ReZero fashion, right? No? It seems they are never watched again, so that is plot convenience? Wilhelm deduces that if he goes to Folter, the others will die, fending off the zombies. The only other one capable of getting to him without being hurt is Grimm. Wilhelm gets him to scream out all of his excuses, that he can't kill his friend, that he can no longer wield the sword, that he has survivor's guilt out of being the sole survivor of one unit, and the only survival of Wilhelm of another, all until they get to the crux of the matter. It might be Folter! I can't use my sword anymore, I'm so scared. Everyone else died and I lived, and I can't stand it. I don't want to die! Grimm charges up the hill toward his undead friend, who is still firing shots at him, and utters one final yell before chopping off Volta's head. Honestly, I don't see what Grimm's problem was. He didn't want to use a sword, he didn't have to. He could have just done this. After the skirmish, the ones who saw Sphinx have to give their report to essentially the War Council of Lagunica. There is chatter on if she is part of the Witches cult, but the idea is cast aside as it doesn't seem likely any branch of the Witches cult would ally with any outside faction. We also see young Miklatov, which makes me do this. As Grimm is busy panicking over speaking to such an illustrious audience, Wilhelm realises something is different about Miklatov. He doesn't look like a warrior, but has an aura as sharp as a sword when he focuses it on Wilhelm. Miklatov tells Wilhelm that he's not usually a part of these meetings, and that he was the one who suggested Roswell go investigate the magic circles. Miklatov doesn't reappear in the book, but it seems even from a young age he had substantial influence on the country, and ties with the Mathers family. Once they leave, Grimm explodes at Wilhelm on how he can be so informal and borderline rude in any and every situation. Pivot, the deputy commander in Zergev's squadron, notes that Wilhelm does actually present himself with the bare minimum of etiquette, showing he comes from some kind of affluent background. As the group make pot shots as to what this background could be, Roswell comes into the room and reveals that Wilhelm is from the now destitute noble family, the Triases. Roswell then goes on to give more relevant information, that Sphinx will be treated the same as the other two leaders of the Demihuman faction, Libra Fermi and Valga Cromwell. Wilhelm questions Roswell's familiarity with Sphinx, but she assures him that they do not work together, but admits how they do know one another. She also announced she is now the head of magical countermeasures for the foreseeable future, and expects she will be dealing with Zergev's squadron frequently going forward. In return, Roswell finds out that Wilhelm's nickname in the Royal Army is Sword Devil, and Bordeaux is referred to as the Mad Dog. The final nugget of important information is that we learn the most recent sword saint, Friebel van Astrea, died in battle. Wilhelm's reaction to this is that, if the bearer of that title has been killed, maybe his talents had not been so great after all. Wilhelm leaves to train, and Grimm follows as not to be left behind. Notably, he only grabs his shield to train, and Bordeaux comments that revisiting Casterfield has fully taken Grimm out of his shell, and he will continue to get better and better. Grimm now exclusively uses a shield, and has gotten to the point where he is able to block some of Wilhelm's attacks, a feat that only Bordeaux can match. For Grimm, watching Wilhelm single-mindedly train for the purpose of the sword was an ideal, and this probably acted as motivation to keep fighting in Zergev's squadron, to keep surviving. As with Casterfield, the status quo remained the same. Roswell would flirt at Wilhelm, Wilhelm would badmouth Roswell, Carol would jump in to defend Roswell, and Grimm would distract her to calm her down. Reports were coming in that both leaders of the Demihuman Alliance had joined the Southern forces to support them, and in response the Royal Army mustered together their single biggest fighting force to counter them, Zergev's squadron included. The place of battle was to be Aihiya Swamp. However, a quarter of this force would not be used for the battle, but to guard against the southern border, where the Wallachia Empire was watching. Even with the protection of the dragon, the Guernica had to show that they were always prepared for the Empire, especially as they were currently weakening themselves with this civil war. Grimm starts out optimistic that this could be the end of the war, but Wilhelm quickly reminds him the last time Valga Cromwell was confirmed to be in battle was Casterfield. As they are preparing for the battle, they meet the battlefield's commander, Lip Barial, a man of 30 with a sadistic nature, instantly honing in on Wilhelm's less-than-par soldiery attitude. Lip sees fit, as he is his commander's commander on this battlefield, but Roswell is outside of this chain of command while still commanding power in it. Wilhelm is able to note from this strike, Lip could probably go toe-to-toe with Bordeaux, and since I'm meant to be telling this from Grimm's perspective, I'll include Wilhelm's evaluation of if Lip Barial and Grimm fought. Grimm he would overwhelm, no question. For the more astute of you, you may recognise the last name Barial, and that's because it's Priscilla's last name. Is she a granddaughter of his? This battle happened 43 years before Subaru was isekai'd, and Priscilla was 18 at the time. But wait, Priscilla was born in Wallachia, and only went to Lagunica after she married a Lagunican noble. Maybe she married Lip's grandson? No. Son? No. Oh no. She married someone 55 years older than her. Back to a more wholesome romance. Before she leaves, Carol gives Grimm a good luck charm. A pendant with a pressed flower inside, yellow and elegant, reminding Grimm of Carol. A flower which Wilhelm finds himself also recognising, and reminding him of someone else. During the battle, Wilhelm and Grimm have a quick heart-to-heart. Grimm reaffirms how he does not want to die, and that he wants to get back home alive. He looks at Wilhelm, and sees that Wilhelm wants that too, that he doesn't fight because he wants to die, or use the sword because he wants to kill. But he actually wants to live, more than anyone. Frustrated, Wilhelm tries to go ahead, but is swiftly followed by the rest of the squadron, further disturbing his desire to be one with his sword, to be steel himself. As he does, he notices again a red flower blooming in the battlefield, of the memory of something so anti-war in the middle of one. As Zergev's squadron wades their way through the droves of enemies, a challenger approaches Wilhelm. And for once in his life, Wilhelm is pushed back. When this happens, Grimm and the others rush to his aid, and Liber Fermi is forced to admit alone he probably cannot take all of Zergev's squadron. But with curses, however, the energy powering a magic circle doesn't dissipate when the circle is destroyed. Unbeknownst to the human forces, a circle encompassing the entire swamp has been placed, and was slowly being filled each time a smaller one was destroyed. Liber gloats about this new meta. Now human forces won't know if it's better or worse to destroy a magic circle when they see it. A tactic that is not utilised again in the entire story. So Zergev's squadron start dying. Liber wishes to negotiate peace with humanity, but understands that, being as dominant in numbers as they are, the humans won't bother to bargain. To do this, humanity needs to suffer great losses, and one of those losses is Zergev's squadron. As he goes to kill Wilhelm, Pivot, true to his name, pivots in the way of Libra's blade, and with his dying breath, orders the others to protect Wilhelm. And they do, not even fighting Libra, but just using their entire strength to act as meat shields. When it is Grimm's turn, he readies his actual shield and declares, "I'm sure of one thing, we won't let Wilhelm be killed, because he is the sword of the kingdom of Lagunica!" Grimm deflects the first blow, blocks the second and the third, even the fourth. But on Libra's fifth strike, Grimm is finally his, the serpent's blade slicing at his throat. Falling to the ground, he watches Libra about to deal the killing blow, before Wilhelm tackles him and they leave Grimm's field of vision. Some point later, the soldiers are able to move freely again. Grimm watches Pivot die in Bordeaux's arms, and then come back. Pivot's fingers wrap around Bordeaux's neck. Bordeaux doesn't react out of his disbelief, but Grimm does. He charges at Pivot and screams in rage, or attempts to, but only a sound comes out of his throat. He manages to throw Pivot off his commander, saving Bordeaux like Wilhelm saved him moments before, but his strength leaves him and Grimm passes out. 40% of the kingdom's fighting power has been diminished from Aihiya Swamp. 90% of Zergev's squadron perished, and the ones who returned were damaged in some way, physically or mentally. Wilhelm, wanting to be left alone, is visited by Carol in his quarters. She tells him that Grimm wants to see him. Grimm is in hospital with possibly the worst of the non-life-threatening wounds across all of Zergev's squadron. He has lost his ability to speak, and with him no longer there to diffuse arguments between Carol and Wilhelm, they argue. Wilhelm mocks Carol for being able to pass along a message from a man who cannot talk. Carol snaps back, not letting Wilhelm belittle Grimm like that. Wilhelm asserts that they have never been friends, to which Carol replies, "Grimm sees you as his brother in arms. I thought maybe I could too," before she leaves, leaving Wilhelm to wallow in his anger. Out of chance, Wilhelm does actually go to visit Grimm, and the first thing Grimm says to him is, "I never thought you would actually come." Grimm now communicates via paper, a high-demand resource, so Grimm would make the paper black with ink before using a new sheet. They converse a bit before stumbling on another heart-to-heart event. Wilhelm shows he has survivor's guilt from Zergev's squadron sacrificing themselves. Grimm explains they did this because Wilhelm is the sword of Zergev's squadron, and if he isn't defeated, neither are they. Wilhelm rebuts this, stating his sword is his alone. However, Grimm says this may have been the case once, but not anymore. The way he lives his life, his singular focus on the sword, of becoming a sword himself, is an inspiration for those around him who are cursed with distractions and temptations to stray from one true goal. Grimm tells him he had this realization since Casterfield, and that he has high hopes for how far Wilhelm can go. Wilhelm sees the expectation and hope filling Grimm's eyes, the sense of brotherhood exuding out of him, and he can hardly bear it. Since the Battle of Aihiya Swamp, the royal army has been put on the defensive, with uprisings popping up all over the country, barring the capital. Wilhelm realises that this is a trap to lure as many soldiers as possible outside of the capital in order for the Demihumans to gain control of the heart of the country. As Bordeaux' squadron attempts to enter the castle to defend it, they are stopped by Lip Barial, who has since been demoted after the defeat of Aihiya Swamp. Once again, they bicker, and once again, Roswell appears and puts favours on Wilhelm's side. They enter the castle and start building a perimeter. Carol joins the squad and, like before, doesn't argue with Wilhelm as Grimm is there to distract her. Apparently him not having the ability to speak does not impede on their relationship. Bordeaux separates to go to the throne room to find and defend the king, but Wilhelm again deduces that the king would probably not be in the throne room at this time, but be praying to one of greater power than himself, to the dragon Volcanica. Wilhelm, Grimm, Carol and Roswell descend to the underground chapel to find dead guards outside the chamber and see two cloaked figures mid-discussion. In this chapel, the people of the kingdom pray to the dragon. The larger shadow said, "Empires worship power, and holy kingdoms worship the spirits. I don't know about the western city-states, but I suppose they must have someone who offers up prayers." "So then, what do you all pray for?" the girl asked. "What do demihumans pray for, and to whom?" If I were to pray, I suppose it would be to the souls of my comrades and ancestors. I, at least, have no other reason to pray." To answer his query, the western city-states of Kararagi worship capitalism, and it's where she's from. When asked how the two managed to sneak into the castle, Valga Cromwell explains that the castle was built when the Lagunicans still held the sigil of the lion before the Covenant of the Dragon, more information of which is in EX1, which I have also made a video about. The relationship between the two could have been like in those times, but quickly steers back on topic, telling the group only demihumans remember the tunnels, as due to their longer lifespans, knowledge is more formidable against the erosion of time. Another piece of knowledge the sands of time take away is something Sphinx still possesses, the sacrament of undead kings. She brings out a piece of bone from a giant long dead, when they reached heights of up to 30 feet, as opposed to the 6.5 feet Valga reaches. She transfuses the bones into Valga and incants a magic spell. Valga swings his massive arm at the group. Wilhelm and Roswell manage to dodge, but Grimm takes the blow head on with his shield to protect Carol, who couldn't get away in time, and the two are blown back outside the chapel and into the hallway. Roswell takes the two to help her pursue Sphinx, who has also fled the chapel. Carol gets her chance to shine as the best sword fighter in the room for once, as a pedigree of the Remendez family and a sword technique, which she announces serves the family of the Sword Saints. I don't know why the Sword Saints need a family of sword fighters when they are literally the best swordsmen and swordswomen in the business. They could have gotten some variants and had a family of spear fighters brought in under them, but I guess that's none of my business. Sphinx hovers in the air, and to reach her, Carol doesn't just jump, but she double jumps. Dead ass like a video game character. She severs Sphinx's left arm clean off. Roswell Jane Mathers, as it turns out, has no aptitude for magic, so in this lifetime she's learnt how to box, and comes in with a metal gauntlet and crushes Sphinx's bones and internal organs with a single punch. Grimm is unable to go on the offensive with a shield, so he stays on the defensive. Sphinx uses her signature move, her ultimate, and Grimm manages to deflect it with his shield, which was given to him by Carol as it is magically imbued, a much better good luck charm than a necklace which earned him a cut throat. Sphinx's attack, all the world. The world? Where have I heard that before? Brings down the ceiling, which just so happens to be connected to the throne room, and Bordeaux comes tumbling down, with an undead Libra in tow. Sphinx is delighted to have the Demihuman's greatest fighter at her side, but before she can order Libra to attack, Libra chops off her other arm. Like any good fight with the undead, when they are defeated, their last moment before they turn to dust has their true self back in control once more. And Libra's true self wanted to kill Sphinx, so Sphinx leaves again. Roswell goes to pursue Sphinx, but before that orders the others to help Wilhelm, who can still be heard fighting. I think now, however, would be a good time to go back and see a different perspective on these events. Let's switch characters and go with Bordeaux. We are introduced to Bordeaux just after the events of Castor Field, where only Grimm and Wilhelm survived from their squadron. Bordeaux first hears about the Sword Devil after his first battle at Rodonis Plateau, where Grimm and Wilhelm first met. After Castor Field, he decides he wants the soldier in his squadron, a boy who was killing enemy lieutenants, but leaves the battlefield with all of his teammates dead. First, Pivot and him recruit Grimm, partly as they believe he will have potential as well, but also being a survivor of Castor Field, and then go to find Wilhelm. Bordeaux gets a bit carried away and decides he wants to fight Wilhelm. They duel, and Bordeaux does lose, but not completely. They fight 10 times, and Wilhelm wins 7 bouts. Bordeaux is exasperated and delighted in equal measure, exclaiming how he can fight toe-to-toe with anyone except the Royal Guard. Wilhelm has little argument to join the Zergev squadron, but isn't ecstatic of this fact. Like with most things, he's neutral, noting Bordeaux's capabilities and appreciating that the rest of Zergev's squadron would be of a similar calibre, but not being impressed by this feat either. Going forward 3 years, Bordeaux can no longer even reach Wilhelm with his halberd. Something when realised made Bordeaux cry and laugh in equal intensity. Bordeaux and Pivot observe and discuss Wilhelm's development of character, or the lack of thereof. "That Wilhelm ain't changed a bit, has he?" Bordeaux said. "Then again, that's one of his strengths." "Every time we go somewhere new," Pivot replied, "I hear fresh rumours of the Sword Devil, and I swear it shortens my life. If I die young, I'm going to assume it's his fault." So, cutting forward to where Pivot dies young, Bordeaux holds his best friend close, screaming at him to stay awake, to keep living. But Pivot doesn't, but Bordeaux still does not give up hope. And like a fairy tale, Pivot starts moving. Grimm charges him to shove Pivot off and blah blah blah, you know. Grimm falls unconscious after this, and then the corpse of Pivot then goes to the living being closest to him, Grimm. But before he can wrap his rapidly cooling fingers around Grimm's neck, a battle axe sends him flying and nearly cuts him in half, rendering him a corpse once more. But unfortunately, that is not the end of Bordeaux's suffering. As Bordeaux stands up, so too do all of the members of Zergev's squadron. All of the dead members of Zergev's squadron. As he stands staring at their undead faces, Bordeaux begins to laugh at the idea of what he must do. That witch! Bordeaux knows the source of this evil magic, and like the mad dog he is, lets out his anger of Sphinx. He laughed as he sobbed, slaughtering his former comrades, the sounds of which being heard all over the battlefield. Because this is still ReZero, it's not a story unless there's suffering. Bordeaux changes dramatically after this, in 2 aspects. The first is his leadership. Without Pivot, Bordeaux has to take up all the work that Pivot used to do, essentially all of the planning and the administration type work. He becomes a lot colder and is more diligent on going to council meetings, now no longer having the freedom to just focus on fighting and thinking of solutions on the fly. The second change is that Bordeaux becomes a racist. Having to re-kill the people closest to him made him kind of hate not only Sphinx, but all Demihumans. This is an outlook he will continue to have in the main series. Oh, what's that? You didn't know Bordeaux was in the main series? Well, let me show you. Bordeaux Zergev, after his gilded career as a battalion leader, becomes something of a scholar and joins the Council of Wise Men, who are effectively ruling Lagunica as they await for a new queen to be chosen. You even see him when they all go to the capital. Look, there he is now. Look, he's that guy.
No, 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 no.
If you don't remember what kind of character he was, he said cool stuff like this.
銀髪のハンバはかの嫉妬の魔女の語り継がれる容姿そのものではないか。玉座の間に入れることすら恐れ多いとなぜ気づかぬ。汚らわしい。
When Wilhelm tells Bordeaux about his hunch that the Demihuman faction will attack the castle, part of the old Bordeaux shines through. He still has his warrior instincts, and they agree with Wilhelm. When they reach the castle, Bordeaux believes he'll find the king in the throne room, and goes up alone to reach him. As he arrives, he is greeted by a very unkingly presence. A presence he has only felt exude from one other person, Wilhelm. He thanks Wilhelm under his breath for all the sparring they used to do. Without it, Bordeaux doesn't believe he could withstand the pressure his opponent exudes. A twin blade comes at the hulking man, dyeing the audience chamber's red carpet even darker with blood as it did. Bordeaux finds himself face to face with Pivot's killer, Libra Fermi. Although he is now one of the undead, Libra still has his aura as the greatest demi-human fighter. As Bordeaux brings in his axe, one of Libra's blades catches it, but cracks under the sheer force of the attack, making its way into Libra's skin. Bordeaux chases this advantage, but a dodge from Libra puts Bordeaux off balance, allowing Libra to graze Bordeaux from his shoulder to his abdomen. Libra begins to spin his blades, keeping Bordeaux on the defensive. As Bordeaux is defending from the onslaught, he feels his comrades fighting beneath his feet, and muses on Pivot's last words to not to neglect what is below you, and that in this moment, he can literally feel his friends beneath his feet. Bordeaux howled. He didn't have Wilhelm's technique, or Grimm's ability to block a blow, nor was he nimble as Carol, or as thoughtful as Roswell, but instead, Bordeaux Zergev gambled everything on what he did have, the body and abilities he'd been given. Allowing himself to be stabbed scores of times, Bordeaux brings down his axe, hitting the undead warrior hard, finishing him. Then they fall down into the great hall below. Libra has his moment of clarity and chops off Sphinx's arms, blah blah blah. You know, moving on! As the leaders of the demi-human faction, Libra and Vauga have to spend most of their time in hiding. But while they may be in charge of this revolution, they do not see eye to eye. Vauga is the one who organises the troops, and makes them more than a mindless mob, with the aim to wipe out and overthrow all humans as revenge for the deaths of his demi-human brethren. It was also his idea to have Sphinx use the corpses against Zergev's squadron and Roswell, or at the very least urge on Sphinx's idea to do so. Libra, on the other hand, is a fighter, and is a hero to the demi-humans. He is needed to raise morale, and have the fighters be at their best on the battlefield. Ironically, Libra wishes for peace. He becomes angry at Vauga for the use of magic circles in Castor Field, stating that they killed too many, and that the humans will not consider parleying after a defeat like that. That even if each demi-human killed 10 humans, they would still lose in numbers, so fighting all out would lead to their extinction. Even with Vauga's solution of using undead soldiers to even the playing field, Libra is against the morality of such a tactic. There is one more figure in this discussion, Sphinx. She doesn't bother partaking in the tactics or strategy, choosing to solely focus on her research to become like her mother. It's not stated which clone of Ryuzu's Sphinx is, but it is most likely the first. Echidna wanted to achieve immortality by being able to transfer her soul to a new body when her current one withered. And while one purpose of Ryuzu was to create a barrier to protect the sanctuary, Echidna also wanted to use her to be able to transfer her soul to the Ryuzu clones which could be created. As they are empty shells, apart from the oldest clones, who over the centuries of their lives have accumulated enough memories to create their own soul, their own odd. When Sphinx was first created, Echidna attempted to copy her soul into this body, but found these bodies could not contain all of her, leaving the Sphinx clone with a fractured personality, with parts of Echidna's knowledge and wisdom, and the insatiable urge to be completed. After 400 years though, I wonder if Echidna was able to perfect this process, being in close proximity to the rest of the clones and even direct contact with Shima when she went into the tomb to save Garfield. After all that time, was it still impossible for the Witch of Greed?
呆れたな。この状況を見てそれが最初に出てくるのか。
Libra leaves the hideout in anger, and Sphinx asks how the Demihumans will proceed. Valga notes that the Demihuman alliance isn't well organised enough to communicate the effectiveness of the magic circles before the humans can communicate their danger, and so Valga decides to use this concept as bait. We'll let them destroy a magic circle. And so we move on to Aihiya Swamp. The general mindset of the Lagunicans is that they believe the Demihumans owe the kingdom for the protection the dragon brings them from threats such as the Valachian Empire, who are constantly on their border. But this logic ignores the fact on why the dragon Volcanica doesn't smite the Demihumans themselves for starting this civil war in the first place, because the Demihumans are a part of the country, they don't owe it. This unconscious prejudice of the human side has been part of Lagunica for 400 years, initially arising when the Witch of Envy destroyed half of the world. Hatred started for any silver-haired half-elves, but eventually expanded to any half-humans. In Lagunica, human and demi-human communities largely left each other alone until the Civil War began. When the big magic circle is activated, Roswell and Carol go about disarming the circle, but before Roswell can make any progress, Sphinx descends upon them. However, Sphinx muses on an alternative outcome if Roswell weren't so hostile towards her. Those with a high degree of specialised knowledge are valuable. If possible, I had hoped you might cooperate in making me complete. My teacher's principles were a barrier to progress. You're just a failed experiment from an earlier time, and I will get rid of you. This is a very interesting line, because if it tells us anything, it tells us Roswell was against Echidna's ideals. Maybe Roswell was against her methods to acquire immortality, sacrificing the life of Ryuzu Meyers and not even telling her about her ultimate goal before she did so. Maybe it's her principle to learn everything, no matter the cost, and in trying to learn something as complex as human emotion, she will never feel love in the way Roswell does to her. Roswell has loved Echidna since he met her. I mean, who wouldn't if some hot chick just walked up to you and did this?
Yeah, boy. I don't know what this is, but it's kind of hot. Nice. Oh, shit. That's quite big.
Yes, please! But she has been incapable of returning these feelings, which has led to Roswell's belief that people's feelings cannot change. Subaru will always idolize Amelia. Amelia will always be a scared, weak little girl. Ram will always hate Roswell for his part to play in the destruction of her village and the death of her parents. And Roswell will always have an unrequited love for Echidna, and while still knowing this, refuses to change and always follow her orders. Either way, Sphinx wasn't happy with this response, and just started blasting at the soldiers around Roswell, evaporating any body part which came into contact with a beam of light emitting from her hand, and then she points her hand towards Roswell. But wait a minute, Roswell doesn't die. We know she's in the castle later, so whoever made this video and put the sequence of events out of order, but still expected to keep some kind of suspense is kind of a dumbass. Let's see if you can use the information provided to you to figure out how Roswell survived this beam of light. If your answer was plot armor, you would be correct. The magic circle slowing down all the humans affects their gait specifically and how well the mana flows through it. Roswell J. Mathers cannot use her gait, so the magic circle does not actually affect her, allowing her to dodge the beam and make a return blow. Sphinx is in shock when she receives blow after blow, but finally manages to teleport away into the sky and decides to leave before any more damage can be done to her. Sphinx, however, realises just about any human skilled enough could take advantage of the damage she has taken and finish her off, especially when she sees the magic circle fade away and the human forces are able to move freely again. So she decides to go find an ally on the demi-human side, one revered in battle who will most definitely be able to protect her in her escape from the battlefield, Libra. Libra and Wilhelm at this moment have taken a tumble, and Wilhelm ends up on top of Libra. It's not an anime unless the main character accidentally falls on top of another character in a compromising position. As they both stand to fight, Libra notes the magic circle is no longer affecting Wilhelm. Wilhelm says some bad words in response. He calls Libra a bitch. The translator for this book decided to bring out the big guns. Wilhelm is confused about why he is so angry, knows that it goes against his creed, and tries but fails to ignore it. I'm only a sword! Just one sword! Loyalty and friendship have nothing! Libra, as the more experienced swordsman, understands Wilhelm's plight. He wishes to be a sword, which first has to be smelted by heat, and Wilhelm is being consumed by red-hot anger, which is melting him down, moulding him into something new. As they fight, Libra notes on Wilhelm's trait, which Libra can never possess, his humanity. He could see in Wilhelm's character that Wilhelm is immature, incomplete, but his anger is slowly giving him the edge. What Libra begins to lose against isn't Wilhelm's drive to be the sword, but the emotions feeding into his fighting. Steel did not heat itself. Libra begins to laugh, stating that he can't get excited about fighting a wooden opponent. If I'm going to pit my way of life against another's, I want it to be someone who bleeds, someone who weeps. Sparks fly and Wilhelm finds an opening on his neck, but Libra blocks just in time and blunts the attack before it can decapitate him, jamming the blade on his scales. Without a weapon, Wilhelm is defenseless, but refuses to admit defeat, and Libra feels an overwhelming sense of sadness on having to end such a promising fighter's life for a cause such as this. However, he realizes the cause is necessary, and his pride as a demi-human wins out. And then Sphinx shoots him through the chest. Knowing Libra's distaste for her, Sphinx decides it's much more efficient to just reanimate him than negotiate with him to help her flee. However, she does promise to tell Valga that Libra was killed in battle, and take extra precautions to keep Libra's corpse in tip-top shape. So that's nice. Wilhelm is enraged by this fact, and is further enraged by Sphinx informing him she doesn't intend to hurt him, which surprises Sphinx. She decides Wilhelm is worthy of observation. She observes Valga Cromwell for his hatred of humanity, Libra Fermi for his juxtaposing nature of mercilessly using the sword, but his sadness for doing so, and now Wilhelm Trias for his anger which supersedes death, all for her goal of being complete. Libra's death allows Valga to enact a plan he could never have done before, as he believed Libra would have stopped him, to wage war against the entirety of Lagunica and use the sacrament of undead kings to its utmost potential. Last time on Dragon Ball Z, Valga absorbed the bones of his ancestors by using the sacrament of undead kings to awaken the lost power of Super Mario! With this immense power, he makes all of Wilhelm's companions retreat to chase Sphinx, but Wilhelm isn't safe yet, as he proceeds to pummel Wilhelm, who is already weakened by his uncertainty of who he is, man or sword. But look out, Valga, because Wilhelm still has a few tricks up his sleeve. Wilhelm manages to pierce the eye of the giant, but is blown away by the Titan's immense strength. And now, Wilhelm is at Valga Cromwell's mercy, seconds away from being crushed. Better hurry up, Wilhelm. Grimm and Bordeaux run in just in time to deflect a punch set to kill Wilhelm. That, or they were just waiting outside the door for the most dramatic time to come in. It's been done before in ReZero. As Valga learns of his comrades' defeats, he laughs, knowing that if he dies here, the demi-humans will be spurred to fight harder than before. As this realization dawns on the others, Wilhelm ignores the implications and tells Valga to continue fighting him. His only priority is the fight between the two of them. What others do outside of the fight means nothing to him, with a conviction that he will do the same no matter the outcome. Keep cutting and keep killing until it's all over. And so the two fight once more, and Wilhelm removing all impurities from within himself as they battled, until finally he manages to stab into Valga's chest, dislodging the bones. As Valga collapses, the floor breaks beneath him as he falls into the abyss below. Is this the last time we see Valga Cromwell? Well, ask yourself, are there any other descendants from the giants who know of secret passages into the castle, who may even have a distaste for anyone with the last name Astrea when they learn that the sword devil who stopped their coup d'etat goes by the name Wilhelm van Astrea, that they may be called Valga C. Romwell? because I can think of one person. After Roswell convinces her companions to aid Wilhelm, she closes in on the maimed Sphinx. Sphinx, using the Demihuman's knowledge of the castle's layout, manages to escape by going through a secret passage. As Roswell follows, she doesn't find Sphinx, but instead comes into contact with Lip Bariol, who tells her that he also found a passage that leads below the castle. Roswell noted that Lip is holding an unusual knife, one that is most likely a meteor, an object infused with magic in some way. When Roswell queries Lip on if he has seen Sphinx, he tells her that he found the armless witch wandering and burned her. Very Salem. He then brings out a necklace which he states remained from the ashes, a woven cord with a single ring threaded through. Roswell takes a keen interest in this and asks Lip to give it to her, who obliges with little hesitation. Roswell has little concern that someone else killed Sphinx, and mainly seems relieved that she now has this ring in her possession, and whispers to herself, "Master, I finished clearing up. What comes next is for the future." Her and Lip part ways, Roswell no longer being interested in him after he has given over all of his information, and Lip goes further back into the tunnels and picks up a body which was hidden in rags, with no confirmation on if it was dead or alive. Now let's talk about some theory. First with Roswell, we don't know how detailed his tomb is, but let's assume the first thing he was told to do was play his part in the destruction of Rem and Ram's Oni village. That meant Roswell had 11 lifetimes to occupy his time with. It is probably safe to assume he knew about Echidna's failed clones for some time, and as Roswell J. Mathers said, "My teacher's principles were a barrier to progress. You're just a failed experiment from an earlier time, and I will get rid of you." Which means even if she is loyal to her and her plan, she still has these boundaries, which is why Roswell is pretty comfortable with killing a version of her master. The ring most likely was from the original Echidna, and Roswell managing to get it back symbolises the end of these distractions, as she can now look into the future and work on what Echidna had written for her to do in the tomb. In her one goal desire to see the written words become reality, a mindset which would mean that any deviation would result in immediate failure, up to the point that when Roswell is finally defeated in Season 2, he will ensure that the one who bested that person can't do everything that he said he would do. Protect everyone. The anime cut a lot of this build-up off, and this soul line was left mistranslated.
誰かが失われれば、私はためらいなく全てを灰にする。妥協は許さない。
Roswell wasn't lamenting on the failure to act out his resolve, but threatening Subaru on if he should fail with his resolve. The sole link between EX1 and EX2 has been the Sacrament of Undead Kings, and I think we have enough information to know how the Dragon Rider from the Sacred Valachia Empire, who provided the dead bodies to Bean Argyle, managed to learn a lesser version of the spell. When Lip receives Sphinx's body, he affirms his resolve to retake what was taken from him after his demotion from Aihiya Swamp. He thinks to himself, "I would do anything to accomplish my goal, even forsake my loyalty to the kingdom. I am my own kingdom. I am my own world." And we know he made connections with the other countries, namely the Sacred Empire of Valachia. Lip managed to find the connections to marry Priscilla, one of the children of the previous emperor, who is once again over 50 years older than her. Lip did seem to have lived the rest of his life in Lagunica, and even administered the dragon tablet, but it's possible he used the Empire to somehow help him get back up in the ranks of the Lagunican nobility by exchanging information. One such thing could be the knowledge of the Sacrament of Undead Kings from Sphinx, or maybe handing over her body wholesale to Valachia, where they discovered the curse directly from her. Maybe the knife he has had something to do with it, like he literally extracted the information from her. Either way, now there is a clear link between Sphinx and the Sacred Valachia Empire through Lip Bariol. Now, one of the selling points of this book is being able to learn more about Wilhelm's meeting with Theresia and the beginning of their relationship. But is it just me, or has a lot of this book been about stuff that isn't that? Yeah, so let's finally get to that selling point. 3 years after their first encounter with Sphinx, Wilhelm was awarded with his first day off, which was essentially forced on him as Wilhelm wanted to spend all of his time training. Since he had been banned from the training grounds, he came up with a 500 IQ idea: go train somewhere else. Once he arrived somewhere else and is about to begin his regime, a voice calls out to him. He turns around in annoyance and sees a girl with long red hair, her profile beautiful enough to send shivers down his spine. Her hair looked like licking flames, and her eyes were the blue of a clear sky. Her neat features gave her sweetness and grace. Wilhelm doubted if she were even human. The girl notes her surprise that someone else is in the decrepit village plaza so early in the morning, and Wilhelm attempts to intimidate her, but it's not very effective. He then attempts to indirectly tell her to leave by saying that there are dangerous people about, and that he might be one of them. She dismisses this. "You're not. I know that uniform. You're one of the castle soldiers, aren't you? You wouldn't do anything wrong," which is an absolutely, completely true statement. The girl decides Wilhelm is a soldier playing hooky and promises to keep it a secret, and in return beckons him over to the abandoned building she is sitting in and points outwards. Wilhelm follows her gaze and sees the field of yellow flowers. Any viewer will know well. The girl reveals that she planted these after all the construction in the area ended due to the war, and was checking up on the fauna's progress. Wilhelm was silenced, not by their beauty, but by his obliviousness, that he never once saw these flowers even though he passed through the area many times, that his perspective was so narrow. "Do you like flowers?" the girl asked. He turned to consider her gentle smile, saying, "No, I can't stand them." And he watched as the happiness drained from her face entirely. The girl was filled with enough anger to rival a storm, and drove him out. The next time Wilhelm had gone to the plaza, she was also there, but the anger had subsided, allowing him the space to practice while she just watched him. This continued for weeks, neither asking for the other's name. Wilhelm referred to her as Flowers Girl in his head. Each time Wilhelm would finish his practice, she would ask him the same question, and he would give her the same answer. After Aihiya Swamp, Wilhelm is unable to keep his feelings from the battle away from this oasis in his life. The Flower Girl, of course, picks up on this and notes how he doesn't seem to be enjoying swinging his sword as much as he did before. Ever since Libra almost ended his life, Wilhelm had trouble focusing on becoming a blade. Frowning again! "You're too young to let your face get stuck that way." Suddenly, the girl was standing in front of the silent Wilhelm. He was startled to realize he hadn't noticed her. Wilhelm questions what she meant by too young, and she tells him that she knows he is 18, which is the same age she is. After some more visits, 3 months after their first meeting, Flowers Girl decides they should learn each other's names, as he would keep calling her "Hey you" or "Girl" when he spoke to her. Theresia. He thought it was a fitting name, always smiling like the sun, sometimes annoyingly talkative and yet charming. Her mood was dangerously prone to sudden swings, but still, Theresia. It was a better thing to call her than Flowers Girl. Wilhelm, however, is reluctant to tell her his name, as he knows people who know him as the Sword Devil are terrified of him, and he doesn't want Theresia to be scared of him as well. However, he can't tell her his thought process, so has no excuse for not telling her his name, and so has to tell her his name. They banter some more, and Wilhelm found the corners of his mouth turning up slightly of their own accord. It was rare for him, a smile that was neither ironic nor grim. Once again, Theresia asks if he likes flowers, and Wilhelm responds with the same answer, but this time, the conversation doesn't end there. "Why do you wield the sword?" "Because it is all I have." Theresia's question about why Wilhelm swings his sword causes him heartache, familiar to the feeling he felt when Pivot sacrificed his life for him and when Grimm revealed his envy for Wilhelm's discipline. Wilhelm also noticed that talking with Theresia would calm him the same way as when he would get lost in practicing with the sword, which now made him feel breathless. "It is as if your sword is crying." This statement causes the emotions building up in Wilhelm to explode at Theresia. She says she can see that using a sword is causing him pain, and unless he has reason to, he should stop using it as it is destroying him. Wilhelm questions the meaning of why the sword is the only thing he has, but is unsure. However, he knows that if he does stop, he will never forgive himself. Theresia hopes he finds this reason which Grimm watches enviously and Pivot gave his life for, so Wilhelm could achieve it. The day after Wilhelm's epic battle with Volga, Wilhelm goes to the plaza. Theresia sees him and calls out to him, making him feel overjoyed and have a sense of well-being, and Wilhelm began to cry. He remembers a light, the light seen when stretching a sword to the sky, a light which could be used to reach everyone and everything around him. Wilhelm hadn't forgotten the light of the sword, but had forgotten what drew him to it, and why he pours his everything into the blade. Theresia touched his weeping form, the heat of her moulding his very being once more. Like with every meeting with her, and every experience with his friends in Zergev's squadron, and the foes he fought to create the sword he is now, the person he is now. Do you like flowers? I don't. Hate them. Why do you wield the sword? Because it was the only way I had of protecting people. As Libra had told him, while a sword is power, it is useless without a person to wield it, and Wilhelm loved being able to use power to protect people. Wilhelm clasped Theresia's hand, and they look at one another. Theresia smiled at Wilhelm, and that day, for the first time, Wilhelm gave Theresia a completely heartfelt smile. Wait, this book isn't over yet? That was a really good place to end it. Alright then. Wilhelm completely changes in battle, no longer lusting after strong opponents. If an ally is injured, he will prioritise getting them to safety. This new attitude doesn't hinder his sword fighting skills, however. It also makes him more amicable to Zergev's squadron and the kingdom as a whole. Carol is not convinced of this change, thinking it is some ploy. Theories fly around between Bordeaux and Grimm, Bordeaux pondering if a woman spearheaded this change, which emits a dissatisfied grunt from Carol. Back in the plaza, Theresia gives some fan service, but it's in the written word, so the quality of the fan service depends on how good your visual imagination is. And Wilhelm reveals he has been promoted to the rank of knight due to his role in stopping Volga and from his recent change of character. Theresia congratulates him on getting closer to his goal as a knight who protects people. Grimm, still being the same man he was at the start of the book, meets Wilhelm at the tavern, this way of life being imprinted on Grimm's personality. Although now, to communicate with anyone at the tavern, he has to use pen and paper. Topic moves naturally from Wilhelm's knighthood to his family, who he hasn't seen since before the Civil War, to the rumours of his change, to Roswell's apparent infatuation of him, to the state of the Demihuman war. The Demihumans have become more ferocious. Now with their backs to the walls and their leaders dead, Grimm wonders what kind of opposing force could drown their rage. Wilhelm no longer believes that his ability to kill any enemy can now cut the Demihumans' rage as a whole, but a more positive power is needed. A hero. As Wilhelm returns to his quarters, he finds Roswell on his bed, who attempts to make some moves on him, which he quickly shuts down, telling her that he doesn't believe her affection to be sincere. Roswell then goes to move on to something actually sincere, her gratitude for his help in achieving her goal with Sphinx. She tells him that the main body of fighting in the Demihuman war has seeped into the Trias family lands. Wilhelm lashes out of her, distrustful of why she would tell him this, but Roswell tells him that, "I don't have any dark designs. It's unusual for me to feel such affection for someone. If I can help the few people I care about to be happy, so much the better. I promise my motives are nothing more sinister than that." Wilhelm brings up the issue with Bordeaux, but Zergev's squadron is stuck in a bureaucratic system, meaning their official deployment will take time. He also warns Wilhelm not to go alone, as now that he is a knight, he is a public figure who must abide by the same system the kingdom lays out. Wilhelm walks into town while thinking, and his feet lead him to the plaza in the poor district. Night has fallen, but Theresia was still there, watching her flowers. This being the first time they had ever seen each other more than once in a single day. She tells him she has been in the field all day and that she is waiting to be picked up by a swordswoman, much stronger than her. Wilhelm deduces Theresia must be someone of noble blood and insensitively asks if she tries to avoid being home. Theresia concedes that this is true, but also is not true, and asks about Wilhelm's family, not knowing it is a sensitive time for him. Wilhelm wallows, causing Theresia to reprimand him. "Stiffen that upper lip! Are you a man or aren't you?" Setting any expectations of toxic masculinity in Theresia aside, she then gave him a hearty smack on both cheeks, which makes what she did before okay in my books. Theresia tells him weeping isn't usual for him, and that he should do what you always do. You know, act haughty for no reason. You should swing your sword like a child, full of unfounded confidence. That's much better. While initially surprised by her perception of him, the phrase, "swing your sword like a child," sticks with him. Wilhelm then offers to escort Theresia back to the entrance to the poor district, and they hold hands on their walk, exchanging banter along the way. Wilhelm calls her a prostitute, you know, the usual stuff. But as he walks off, Wilhelm rips off his knight's sigil from his uniform. As Wilhelm travels back home, we learn why he fled in the first place. Over time, his family became less supported over his addiction with the sword, and Wilhelm eventually got into a fight with his oldest brother, which resulted in Wilhelm running away and joining the royal army. He thinks to the peaceful times he'd just been in, letting him live out in fantasies where he is strong enough to fight off the entire Demihuman army from his homelands, where his disregard of the rank of knight would be pardoned, where one day he would come back home with Theresia to introduce her to his family. On arrival to the Trias lands, however, reality sets in. The sword devil charged into the Demihuman's flank, staining the lands already red from flame and blood with more blood. Heads flew, limbs were severed, lives were ended. But as the Demihumans realised who their assailant was, and that he had come alone, the simple reality of numbers took their toll, leaving Wilhelm completely surrounded, completely isolated. This fact makes Wilhelm realise, even though he has always tried to fight alone, he never truly was, that he always had an army that was on his side on the battlefield, that he was closely accompanied by Zergev's squadron. With this realisation, the first blow hit him. He took a wound to his back. He spun around and pierced his ambusher through the heart. As he did, more attackers closed in. He tried to jump out of reach, but his feet got tangled. He blocked from an unnatural position, feeling the impact in every bone in his body. He fell to his knees, then collapsed where he was. Wilhelm finally drops his sword in the face of this relentless enemy. Now feeling like a hollow shell, seeing the sword that would end his life, Wilhelm finally sees the joy of life, and the gravity of all the killing he has caused before. All he can utter in light of this is, As Theresia kills the immediate threat near Wilhelm, she moves to the denser crowds of Demihumans, while the rest of Zergev's squadron catch up to Wilhelm. Wilhelm tries to push past them to get back into the fight, but stops himself when he sees Theresia's sword work, a beautiful and kind reaper who took their lives without letting them suffer the knowledge that they were dead. Even if I work the rest of my life, I'll never reach that place. Only the ones who deserve it can make it. Grimm successfully pushes Wilhelm to retreat, and as they go back, he sees Carol, looking not with awe, but something closer to concern. Wilhelm then realises he is looking at Theresia van Astrea, the Sword Saint. Weeks pass before Wilhelm's injuries recovered enough for him to make it back to the plaza, sword in hand, where a familiar figure was waiting for him. He charged her, but she simply caught his blade between her fingers, greeting him with silence. Wilhelm drew back and struck again, only to find himself on the ground. Wilhelm tries again, pouring his entire being into a final strike, more polished and precise than any strike he used against Libra or Valga, and Theresia evaded it. Theresia then, unknowingly to Wilhelm, takes his sword and forces him to the ground with just the hilt, before withdrawing and telling him she will not be returning to the plaza. Theresia tells Wilhelm he has a good reason for using the sword, and that she will use that reason as the Sword Saint, and Wilhelm realised he had given someone who absolutely detests using a sword a reason to use one due to his own powerlessness. As she walks off, he shouts, "I'll steal that sword from you! What do I care about your blessings or your station? Don't make light of wielding it, of the beauty of a steel blade! Sword Saint! That was the last time the Sword Saint and the Sword Devil saw each other in the place they first met. It was later reported that during the battle on the Trias lands, the first publicly recorded battle of the new Sword Saint, she had killed nearly 1,000 opponents. The Sword Devil, on the other hand, who turned his back to the kingdom by throwing away his rank as a knight, slew only 300, a feat which was easily and welcomely forgotten by the kingdom, as well as the Sword Devil's existence, as he disappeared from the royal army as a whole, while the Sword Saint became the force to quell the Demihuman's rage, the hero that the kingdom needed. All of the characters we've looked at so far have been close to Wilhelm and have seen his growth, but there is one character who is also close to Theresia and has witnessed her growth, Carol Remendez. When Theresia was 12, the blessing of the Sword Saint moved from Freebel van Astrea to her, and Carol, 14 at the time, was assigned as her attendant. Carol was initially unimpressed by Theresia and decided to test if she was indeed the Sword Saint. Carol set out to ambush Theresia, and when she did sneak up upon her, she found herself spread out on the floor, with Theresia weeping and apologising above her. Theresia, it turns out, was not only gifted with the divine blessing of the Sword Saint, but also the divine blessing of the Reaper, where any wound that she causes on another will never heal, or in Theresia's eyes, a curse. Knowing this, Carol realises the severity of what Theresia is going through and goes to apologise, but is apologised to first. Carol, seeing that Theresia is just a peaceful girl who loved flowers, who was unfortunately favoured by the sword god, vows to help actualise Theresia's dream of never having have to swing the blade, for what it will do to her. Branching off this book quickly to cut content from Season 2, which I do believe will be addressed in Season 3, although obviously I can't say that for certain. If you don't want to know even the content the anime skipped, even though it was in the source material, so is part of the story, you can skip to this timestamp. Like I said, I'm not going to spoil anything which happens post Season 2. This is purely something that the anime skipped. When Subaru leaves the Carsten estate with Amelia, Wilhelm talks to him about an old wound which was given to him by someone with the divine blessing of the Reaper, his wife, Theresia. It had never healed, but the wound would become more severe the closer the one inflicted it was to Wilhelm, and the wound had just opened up. And then Subaru is just like, lol, K-bye, and then fucks off to the sanctuary. At the beginning of the Demihuman War, Theresia was sent out to battle with her family. Before the war began, her oldest brother, someone who loved the sword, comforted her about the weight that hung over her head, and promised he would bear that weight with her. To Theresia, he was worthy of the divine blessing she had received, and he sacrificed himself in the first battle to save her life, as she was too scared to draw her sword. The battle was not formally recorded, and Freebel was publicly still believed to be the Sword Saint. As the war waged on, Theresia's younger brother perished, and so did her second eldest brother, and finally her uncle fell. And so, whenever there was a request for the Sword Saint to be dispatched, Carol Remendez would go in her place. During the nights, Carol would overhear Theresia crying in her bed, apologising to her family who had given their lives for her because she wasn't strong enough to fight. And Carol wished, pleaded, that someone would come along to placate the Sword Saint's heart. As the war went on, various branches of the Astrea family would try to convince Theresia to join the army, in fear of their family reputation going into decline. Because of this, Carol suggested Theresia spend most of her time away from home to avoid such pressure. One evening, when she went to pick Theresia up, she had a different atmosphere about her, and when she questioned if anything had happened, Theresia simply replied, "I met a very rude sword today." When Carol first stumbled upon Wilhelm in conversation with Theresia, she was sure things would explode between them, but was surprised to see that Wilhelm, someone she viewed as a beast in human clothing, caused Theresia to smile. She was conflicted between her desire for Theresia to be saved by someone, and that someone being Wilhelm. As time passed and Wilhelm stopped Valga, Carol began to believe he had good in him and could fit the expectations of the Sword Saint to end the war. She also became envious of him, not due to his sword skill, but by his skill to coax out the true Theresia from her shell. And then, in Carol's eyes, the sword god struck again. Carol was conflicted with informing Theresia about Wilhelm returning to the Trias lands. She didn't think anything could be done now that he had left, but not telling her would be a betrayal to her as her servant, and when she did, the sword saint truly awakened. Carol watched in pain as Theresia guarded Wilhelm, stone-faced, but Carol could tell on the inside she was weeping. Now resigned to her fate, after this battle, the kingdom would not tolerate any more excuses. Theresia rose to the rank of hero, and Carol prayed for her heart to be saved, but this time not by anyone, but by the one person who she knew could save him. Due to the presence of this new hero, Joinus Lagunica, the king, and Kragrel, the Demihuman's representative, went into peace talks, and the war finally ended after 9 years. On their way to celebrate the end of war ceremony, Theresia stops when she sees Roswell J. Mathers, who offers her a ceremonial sword, considering that she is the sword saint, about to present herself to the public eye for the very first time. As Roswell leaves, Theresia considers calling after her, but stops herself as she is still chained to her duty. Then she hears Roswell's voice in her head. That might be quite fortuitous, but also a bad habit. Every once in a while, it wouldn't hurt to do something selfish like he did. So I gave my romantic rival a bit of help. I can practically see him frowning about it right now. When Theresia entered the ceremonial hall, the people were enamored by her, unanimously thinking she held the beauty and elegance of a flower, and that martial steel was unsuited for her. This did not last long as a cloaked figure entered the hall. They both raised blades, Theresia's beautiful, white, sacred blade, and the cloaked figure's rusted and blunt blade, before leaping at one another. The fight seemed much closer to a dance to the onlookers, her eyes wet with tears, cheeks red, each exchange bringing her happiness. Then the opponent is revealed. For the few experienced in battle, they felt their souls tremble upon seeing someone keep up with the sword saint's skill, to finally see the answer to a question they've been asking themselves for 2 years, like any good schoolchild would ask, or any Dragon Ball Z YouTuber. Who would win in a fight between the sword saint and the sword devil? The strikes became continuous, making a singular sound, like music, captivating everyone around them. But every song must, and the loser stepped down. The sword saint, who had dropped her sword in the last exchange, now with half a rusted blade at her throat. Wilhelm has finally proven that he loves Theresia more than the sword god who had gifted her her blessings, that he will take the sword from her so he can shoulder the weight of it, that he can protect her as he does, and all she needs to do is tend to her flowers. Do you like flowers? I've learned I don't hate them. Why do you wield your sword? To protect you. Do you love me? Can't you tell? As they part, the spell over the hall is broken, and Wilhelm is rushed by his old friends, Grimm and Bordeaux. While not annoyed about what will happen next, Wilhelm considers avoiding it by running off with Theresia, who stops him with visual annoyance over not confessing his feelings to her properly. Wilhelm takes a deep breath, leaning towards her ear, but before he can speak the words, they get stuck in his throat, and all the courage that the sword devil can muster is, "I'll tell you sometime when the mood takes me." And that's where the book ends, perfectly with the season 1 flashbacks. EX3 picks up straight up after this to see the repercussions of Wilhelm trying to re-enter the Lagunican society after he became a criminal of sorts, as well as the wedding between the Sword Saint and the Sword Devil. It also serves as an introduction to a villain not seen in the main series, to a Sin Archbishop of the Witch Cult, whose seat has been left empty by the time Subaru arrives in Lagunica.
もしあなた傲慢ではありませんですか？滞在司教の6つの席のうち傲慢のみが未だに空席なのですよ。